Thank you, Madam Moderator. I don't know about riveting, but it's absolutely essential to talk about how we're going to continue to fund these ministries going forward. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about how much we rely upon your generosity, both as local churches as well as individual donors. 65% of our core operating budget support comes from local church giving and individual donors. And if you add the directed ministries, which you've been hearing about today, that number moves to 80%. And so before we begin, I just want to make a point. Not only are we trying to do more to support our broader affiliate network, but we also realize that the more that we can support local churches with resources that are important to you, the more that we increase our own justification for you to support us. And so I want to mention three quick places that we're spending time. And in the hallways, we've even talked about some of these with you directly. Pastoral compensation and pastoral housing issues. We are putting new resources in the hands of the superintendents and ordered ministry to be a better resource for you and your pastors as you talk about these issues. We spend a lot of time on the phone, which we're delighted to do, but we can do better in providing you better resources. So I want you to know that we're working on that. Also, housing. Many pastors, as the parsonage trend has gone away, have shared equity agreements with their churches that are sometimes not constructed very well and can be a real harm either for the church or the pastor. We're working on that. Benefits and insurance. You know about benefits, but we're also working on minimum insurance levels that the local church should have, and we'll make our resources available for free to make sure that you're adequately protecting yourself. Lastly, online giving. For any of you who use covenant giving, you recently saw some reasonably dramatic reduction in the cost of credit card processing. And while I'm not ready to announce it yet, I think in the next few months, we're working on lowering the aggregate cost of credit card and e-check processing for your own giving dramatically again. And so we hope that some of these things will be really useful ministry tools for you in the local church setting. And so we look forward to more dialogue on that. I draw your attention to the large handout that you have. That's what I'll be referencing. Again, it was handed out yesterday. Again, some very brief context on this budget. It includes operating missions, directed missions. I would note that last year, Dean had a rather tough task ahead of him because remember, we reallocated into the 5 new mission priorities. And so you'll remember last year it was a rather complicated chart as we took all of our missions and reallocated into the core mission priorities. That was complete last year, and especially as we talk about make and deepen disciples, you'll note that 3 different groups came together in that formation and was really a wonderful amount of work. Through that, so we're into a clearer budget picture in 2016. Again, the budget that is before you has been affirmed by COLT, by the Council of Administrators, by the Finance Committee, and also by the Executive Board. And just as a point of privilege, I want to give recognition to Tom Sprague, who is the chair of the Finance Committee, and also to Joel Davidson, who is the outgoing chair of the Board of Pensions and Benefits. Our work would not be possible without them. Lastly, you'll see that I wrote in the context letter that I would like to personally commit to change the timing of next year's budget presentation. The Executive Board meets in March, and then we meet in June to give final approval. And so that happens right at the annual meeting, and that's the reason why we're handing out the budget literally 24 hours in advance of its approval. And next year, while March will be too early for us to complete our work, which takes 3 or 4 months, The Finance Committee will attempt to affirm the budget in May. We'll have executive board approval telephonically or some other way. We've not yet decided, and we will try to distribute the budget to you hopefully when the normal delegate materials go out, and hopefully that will help in your own review of our work. I wanted to give you just a simple kind of key takeaway by each mission priority. What is the real driver of the budget? So let me give you a little data. Start and strengthen churches. Understand that church planting appropriations are really the core driver of that budget. And so that comes up from the conference level. And so you'll see as you look at the annual report that in 2014, we actually, remember from yesterday, had a lower level of appropriations. The cadence and the timing can change. And so we had about 19 plants. Last year, 28 are predicted or scheduled for this year, and the demand for 2016 remains very robust. And so understand that we also measure our return on that investment. And I'll tell you, been really encouraged. We pulled some data together that I'd like to share with you. If you look at churches that were planted over the last 15 years, there have been $17 million in appropriations out of our operating budget that have gone to support those churches. And the ministry returns are obviously remarkable. 350 plants, over 35,000 people attend those plants. So well north of 10% of the attendance data that we reference. And that was actually not inclusive of some of the larger plants that happened before that. But listen to the economic return. Of that $17 million, $13.8 million has been donated back to the denomination from those plants. So our net investment in relatively early churches is about $3 million over that time period. That is just a wonderful testament to the strength of the work of this team. Lastly, in 2014, those churches planted in the last 15 years donated back proceeds sufficient to cover 100% of the appropriations that we put into play last year. So I just want to share that as an encouragement that we measure our return on investment on the plants as well, and we're really encouraged by that. Make and deepen disciples, as I mentioned, you'll see in the budget that there's a pretty material 100,000 or plus reduction in make and deepen disciples. I'll mention that in a minute, but know that in large part that was related to the complexity of the transition in the organizing for mission process that was completed last year. Develop leaders. You will see growth in develop leaders as well as Love, Mercy, Do Justice. Part of it is that they have smaller core budgets, but another part of it is that Develop Leaders is excited about a Center for Leadership that is in formation with a lot of resources that relate to lay leader training. And in Love, Mercy, Do Justice, no other budget over the last 10 years has had the notional growth of over $500,000 that Love, Mercy has. And I would tell you that I am incredibly excited about the dialogue with both Debbie and Cecilia now about scaling that budget in really creative and material ways. Lastly, Serve Globally is really driven by our long-term missions forecast. Remember, of the 120 missionaries or so throughout the world, the vast majority of those are long-term missionaries. Those are all committed to in our operating budget. And so the operating budget trends really follow that trend. Hopefully you were excited by that graphic.
Riveting.
It should have also included Make and Deepen Disciples, and I just want to make this summary comment as well. You can't simply look at the budget on a notional basis and compare the different priorities and say we have a larger budget in Serve Globally and Start and Strengthen, and so there's an inequity there. we'd like to make every budget larger, but I do just want to make one point, and that is that Start and Strengthen and Serve Globally are fundamentally different. In the corporate world, we would say they are vertically integrated. All the long-term missionaries are in Serve Globally. Start and Strengthen has all the appropriation dollars that are in the budget, and we've talked about the return that we get that on the income side. The other three mission priorities are equippers. They are consultors, content providers, enablers, supporters, leveragers. But what they are leveraging is all of the wonderful work that's already being done at the local level. So my point is not to say that we don't want to grow every budget, but those smaller budgets punch above their weight because they're leveraging work that you're doing out in the field. And that is fundamentally different than the larger two budgets. They're also doing that, but they're also supporting large direct investment that are made through that budget. Whether you can see the screen or not, you have the fold-out sheets. I'm going to start with the middle section on your sheet and talk just for a quick minute about directed missions. So remember, these are missions that are able to put into ministry what they raise, so the church doesn't take the same economic risk on these missions. You will see 14 actual column, 15 budget, and the 16 proposed budget, and really just a few changes. I do want to mention, as Don did yesterday, remember that $600,000 for Covenant Kids Congo is only what comes through the denomination. Your commitments in sponsorships directly through World Vision as a part of this program generate over $3 million on an annual basis. And so this certainly understates the effect of what you're doing. You'll notice that missionary in-country projects are down. So these are projects that are added within the setting of mission work that's already been done in a country. We have just noticed that there's been a decline in a lot of those projects, and so we've taken the opportunity to draw that budget down a little bit. You'll note that the aggregate directed ministry budget is increasing by 9.4%, really wholly the result of the incredible momentum of the Paul Carlson partnership team. And so you heard from Merritt today, and just really wonderful support for that ministry, not only within the covenant, but also from well outside as well. Lastly, I just want to make a point on SPE. You'll remember that the Sustaining Pastoral Excellence grant originally came from the Lilly Foundation, and as that grant declined, which this represents the continued runoff of that grant, which is now complete, but you should know that both Bethany Benefits and the Ministerium are now increasingly supporting that program to make sure that we care for our pastors. And I know so many stories of people who have benefited from that. And so while it's declining in aggregate, we're working very hard to find ways to continue to make that a thriving ministry. So the net effect on directed missions is 9.49% increase, all directed straight into these incredible directed missions. Now, if you focus on the top part of the budget page, we'll talk about the operating mission investments that we commit to. So much like your local church, this is what we're committing to for 2016 with a real sense of faith in the local church and in God's provision to provide resource. Let me make a few observations. Start and Strengthen. If you look at 2014, you'll remember that the activity, the timing and the cadence of plants was lower, and based on the growth that we see ahead of us, you'll see a slight increase over the 15 budget, but if you focus on the notional increase from 14 to 16, really a large increase of over $500,000, and we're excited to continue to generate returns on our planting activity. Make and Deepen, again, the optic of an 8% reduction in the budget, 100,000 or so. But remember, this is all really attributed to some of the inefficiency that was there with respect to the pulling together of three different priorities into a single group. And what I want you to know, especially for Michelle, as she comes to lead this group, is Evelyn and I have spent a lot of time and feel very comfortable that there is great room for mission and for Michelle to put her own mark on her priorities in this mission. Develop leaders. I just want to remind you that our support for North Park University is embedded within this line item. And you'll note that the growth in both Develop Leaders and Love Mercy are our highest percentage increases. Their core budgets are smaller, so part of that is the law of small numbers. But again, the Center for Leadership Work and Develop Leaders. And in Love Mercy, Do Justice, Cecilia and I have had wonderful conversations about people that we have already identified that have significant capacity and that we think have a real heart for what Debbie has led and what Cecilia now will lead. And my own prediction is you will see this budget continue to grow in ways that are both wonderful stewardship for the church because it comes along with income sources to support its growth. And so really excited about where that is heading. Serve globally. You heard the comment yesterday that the strong US dollar, when it's converted into currencies around the world, is giving us a great current expense savings. And this reduction in the budget, even though long-term missions continues to increase, is a reflection of that benefit for us. And so we're taking out a little bit of the cushion that we have because the dollar is in our favor, and we believe it's going to stay that way for some time. Last point, shared expenses you'll see continue to drop. I would tell you my goal is to put more dollars into ministry and less into anything that supports ministry, even though we know how important that is. And so you saw that in 2014, and you'll continue to see that. And then on communications, hopefully you've seen the dramatic changes in not only the companion, but in our media, in our coverage of these events. And so there are a lot of new resources that have been added to communications. And so as they all get into their roles, it's been a time of a little inefficiency in that budget as we build up to scale. But the returns on that have been astounding in terms of the quality of what we're doing. And so not surprised to see a slight increase there. If you look at the bottom of your page then, how will we finance these investments? You'll notice that church giving and individual donor giving are projected to be relatively flat, but it actually underscores substantial expected growth. And here's what I mean. If you look at the 2014 column, we ended up at $8.2 million. So you'll note that we're expecting over $500,000 of growth in church giving for the 2016 budget year. That is $50 a month per church of increased giving from where we're at today. I would also tell you, based on our long-term missions forecast, as long-term missionaries come in, you so wonderfully support that ministry. And so we look at all the levers, and while the budget is flat to 15, the 15 budget was rather aggressive. And so we feel it's appropriate to hold the level and work on our strategies of supporting you as you support us. Donor support looks flat, but remember the 2014 number was over 30% increase from the prior year. So you've been incredibly generous, and so we've built in a flat expectation because of the incredible recent growth, and we're doing a lot in advancement and also the care for church giving to continue to support really the lifeblood of what we do, which is church and individual donor giving. Fees and expense transfers, this represents really the net economic benefit to us of the entirety of the ECC enterprise that we talked about, the $1 billion plus of activity. And also bequest transfers, you can see that we continue the trend of reducing our annual expectations. So this year we had a budgeted amount of $914,000. We're bringing that down to $469,000, which is something that we really feel comfortable that we can draw in on an annual basis. Anything above that is blessing. but we have to wean ourselves from an annual expectation that those unpredictable bequests will be there. Lastly, communication sales. Our budget last year, or this year that we're in, is 470. Our run rate in communication sales has been around 400. We all know there are increasing competitive pressures with Amazon and all kinds of other outlets. I am pleased to say in 2015, our communication sales to date are up, and so would really encourage you to support the bookstore, support the outlets, support communications and all the great work that they do, especially as we invest more in that area. Lastly, rental income is just contractual. We have leases with Covenant Trust Company, with National Covenant Properties, and with Paul Carlson Partnership, all of the entities that are truly independent entities. And this is a third-party contractual lease where we have escalation built in each year. So, strategic themes, again, I just want to keep in front of you: increase board-designated mission reserves, not to build a stack of cash, but to ensure that we can continue to invest in ministry and to protect the church from the wider obligations that it makes. And so, as I looked at the questions that came forth that we'll talk about later, really happy that some of you spent time with the audit and looked at the many obligations that we make. Secondly, sustain the long-term health of our plans that we provide to you. Thirdly, making sure that we're putting good stewardship first and that we're working with the broad array of affiliates to do better together what we do separately today in some instances, and to put more money into mission and ministry, and reimagining those economies together well beyond the $25 million budget is something that's of great priority to us. So, Madam Moderator, that concludes my presentation and the motion.